Hi everybody and welcome back to my little YouTube channel. If you're new to this channel, my name's Amanda. I'm a diagnosed autistic adult. I'm 40 years old and I was diagnosed a few years ago. In today's video, I'm going to talk about anxiety and autism. I'm really passionate about this subject because anxiety is something that really badly affects me, and I'm sure if you're watching this video, you feel the effects of it too. Before we get started, I just want you to know that anxiety can affect absolutely anybody, and you don't have to have autism or ADHD in order to be diagnosed with anxiety or in order to have anxiety. Anxiety is a really common disabling disorder and it affects so many people globally. But anxiety is one of the highest co-concurrent conditions that affects autistic people in the United Kingdom, and I dare say globally. I've not looked into the statistics of that yet. So it's one of the most common symptoms that go alongside autism spectrum conditions, and it's a disabling condition because it's one of those things that affects every single aspect of our lives. It can affect children, adolescents, adults. It can affect anybody. And it can start at any time. Sometimes people develop anxiety through triggers, and other people just have it all the time. It seems to just go along with our autism diagnosis, almost like it's a built-in genetic condition. Now, autistic people on our day-to-day basis have to navigate the social environment around us, and that can involve so many sensory triggers, from bright lights to loud noises to different textures and tastes and sensations of food. I can list more, but that's just a few of them. And so anxiety can go alongside that because we can feel particularly anxious when we leave the house, for example, and have to go into crowded or work environments or school environments even. And so it can mean that every single day of our lives can just be fraught with this a massive amount of anxiety, and it can stop us from doing things, and it can really have a devastating impact on our quality of living. So what are some of the common signs and symptoms of anxiety? Let's find out. So the first symptom of anxiety is feeling incredibly worried and panicky about everything. And that could be, or it could sound to somebody else, like we're worrying about the most simple things, like travelling to work in the morning. And what happens if I can't get a parking bay at Morrison's when I go to buy my milk on Wednesday? And it can come across as the most trivial thing to a lot of people, but to us, it can almost feel like a life and death situation, and it can stop us from completing our tasks. And I want you to know that a lot of people have anxiety. It's a natural part of human existence, and it's part of what we call the fight or flight response. It's sort of an evolutionary response to a stressful situation, and it's completely natural. It's a completely natural thing to have. For example, imagine if a huge gorilla or a huge lion, for example, or a dinosaur, if dinosaurs came back to life, that would be quite nice. Or it probably wouldn't, because they probably all eat us. But imagine if a huge dinosaur, a T-Rex, was chasing you down the street tomorrow. You would get anxiety, and that would be there for a reason. If you didn't get anxiety, you wouldn't get that fight-flight response. So you probably wouldn't have any fear, and you wouldn't run, and then you'd just get eaten. So it's there as a defensive mechanism. It's a protective mechanism, so that we run and we escape danger. And fight-flight, as it says, can either be we run and we try and escape it, or we stay and fight it, and we stay and fight the enemy or the aggressor. And both are part of our natural evolutionary protective biological system So I'm not saying that anxiety is an abnormal thing, but anxiety, when sort of suffered long term for months and years and years and years, then becomes a clinical diagnosis. It then becomes what we call a disability, because we shouldn't have anxiety every single day, all day. It can have devastating effects on our mental health and indeed our physical health and our overall life expectancy and well-being. Another symptom of anxiety is an increase in our heart rate. Now, obviously, when we get stressed, and I'm sure everybody knows this because everybody at some point or another on planet Earth has been in a stressful situation, and you'll know from that your heart rate starts to increase. It starts to feel pounding, you start to get a red face, you start to feel really overwhelmed. And that happens when autistic people are experiencing anxiety. You'll probably notice your heart beating more, pump, pump, pump more, and your face starting to go flushed and red, and that's because the blood's pumping more blood around the body. It's part, again, of the fight-flight response. A lot of people also notice an increase in things like palpitations, and that's because they're more aware of the heart rate during that panic attack or that anxiety attack. So an increase in heart rate is one of the big ones up there, and it's perfectly natural as part of that anxiety response. But if it happens constantly, coming back to what I've just said before, it can be really detrimental to our physical health. Another sign of anxiety or having a panic attack with autism is an increase in breathing, an increase in respiration. And that's literally because we're trying to get more oxygen to our brain for it to function appropriately in that situation. So you might notice you start to feel breathless, or you start to feel like you've got chest pain, and so you're having to breathe more. And of course, combined with that increase in heart rate, increased breathing is one of the most common signs of anxiety. So naturally, when our heart rate starts to increase and we start breathing more rapidly, you're going to start to notice sweating and hot flushes, and that's really common when you're experiencing anxiety or a panic attack. And it's something that's been a real debilitating symptom of mine throughout the years, the sweating side of it, because coming back to what I said before, I feel like when I'm feeling anxious and I start sweating, other people can see me sweating, and sometimes in the past the sweat's poured off my forehead, especially in a work situation where I've faced an incredibly anxious scenario, something that might not be anxious to other people but has been to me. I'll start sweating and the sweat used to pour off my forehead, and then I used to feel that other people would see me sweating, and that would make my heart beat more, and then I would breathe more heavily and feel like I've got more chest pain, and it would again snowball. So you can see a lot of these symptoms, they tend to accumulate and cause this massive snowball effect, and they can lead to a panic attack, and you can see why. And then I don't know if you've ever experienced anxiety yourself, but a lot of the time when I feel anxious, I start feeling incredibly sick. I feel sick to the pit of my stomach. And nausea is one of the most common symptoms of anxiety. It can actually make me be sick as well. So sometimes when I'm particularly stressed about something, especially when I used to be at work, I'd often be sick in the morning. There are other conditions, impending heart attacks and other things that can cause nausea. But if you have autism and you constantly feel all of these symptoms of anxiety and you're feeling sick, or you are being sick when you're feeling stressed, it might be worthwhile just speaking to your GP, because there are medications that you can take to help lower those symptoms. So why would an autistic person have anxiety or feel panicky or have a constant feeling of anxiety on a day-to-day basis? Let's find out. So like I've said before, autistic people, we love routine, and we don't like change or unpredictability. And the world itself can feel particularly foreign to us. It can feel like we're living on an alien civilization, and we're just, you know that if you've ever played a jigsaw and you always get that one little piece of jigsaw that just doesn't fit, and you can't find where it fits, and it's frustrating. That's how it feels to an autistic person. We feel like that piece of jigsaw that just doesn't fit, and we are essentially aliens in a neurotypical world, and the world is a constantly changing, evolving place, and change and evolution is change, are two things that autistic people don't like. And so living in that world where we're having to constantly deal with change and uncertainty can be incredibly anxiety provoking. And I think for me, that's one of the main causes of my anxiety. What's one of yours? Leave a comment below, let me know. Does the uncertainty of life cause you to have massive surges of anxiety when you wake up every morning? It really does affect me badly. And don't forget, autistic people have a difficulty recognising, managing and regulating our emotions. And so the world can feel like an incredibly unpredictable environment. And that can be incredibly stressful, and it can lead to panic, stress and anxiety. So you might notice your autistic friends, families, loved one having a massive amount of meltdowns. And that's because most of the time we feel incredibly anxious around social situations, especially group gatherings, work environments. And this unpredictability and having this anxiety constantly every single day can just be emotionally and physically exhausting. And exhaustion leads to meltdowns. So if your autistic loved one is constantly having meltdowns, for example, you might have a child that has autism, they might come home from school and the teacher might say they're a goody two-shoes at school and they're smiling and happy and they never cause any problems. They always complete the homework, for example. But when they get home, they just hit rock bottom and they have meltdowns. And that might be because they've had to try and mask and regulate their emotions as best as possible during that school environment. But it's just absolutely exhausting. They've felt this constant anxiety all day, and it's been a battle trying to mask or maintain this neurotypical persona. And having that constant state of anxiety within all day can be just draining. And so when they get home, they just explode. And that's what you're seeing in your autistic loved one. It's this masking of social anxiety on a day-to-day basis. And it can just be draining, exhausting, and overwhelming. But the problem with constantly masking and constantly trying to cover up our social anxieties in public and in work environments, for example, is that it leads to eventual burnout. Now, burnout is something that autistic people describe as this overwhelming feeling of exhaustion. And it leads sometimes to a total shutdown, and that's happened to me in the past, where we just can't bring ourselves to complete simple tasks like brushing our teeth, and we might just stay in bed and retreat to a quiet place. And things that we used to be able to do more effectively, we're just not able to do anymore. And that's called burnout. And it's something that I'm hoping by making these educational videos, we can help inform people about autism and masking and social anxiety, so that we can just be ourselves in public and we don't have to cover how we truly feel. Because at the end of the day, burnout has such a negative impact on our mental and physical health. And sometimes we can lose skills, simple skills that we've been able to do before in the past. Once we've had a burnout, we can lose those skills. And so it can be really debilitating. And I'm hoping that's something that nobody ever has to experience. So if you think you've got anxiety, talk to somebody, friends, family, your GP, even your employer, and get support. And I want you to know that you are not on your own. I don't ever want anybody to feel like they're alone. I know exactly how you feel. Hope you've enjoyed this video. If you've enjoyed it, please consider hitting like, commenting and subscribing, and I shall see you on my next little vlog. Cheerio.